Hey everybody, I'm East Coast Pete. Welcome to my show Mid-Rock Crisis, where we try to save rock one artist or one band at a time. Two quick announcements. My computer had a bit of a glitch. I believe that's been corrected now. Got a couple of really poor audio adventures out there that I'm going to try to redo now. This one's going to be about Sixto Rodriguez. So, East Coast Pete, how is this all going to save rock and roll? Well, I'll tell you how. The way I'm doing it is looking up artists and finding out about as much as I can about them. Now, these are artists that I like a lot. I'm not going to probably have every artist that you've ever heard, that you've liked. But what you can do is you can go and find out the same things about the artist that you really like. I mean, obviously you're going to listen to the songs or the music. You're going to want to find out about the history, how they became famous, why is one album better than another? Or is their first album their best album? Is their fourth album their best? Or is their last album their best? You know, there's so many things you can look at. Why do you like some bands and why other bands that are similar you don't like? Why? You dig into the music, how the music was made, what instruments were used, what do the lyrics mean? I mean, a lot of our bands nowadays, you listen to the lyrics and you really don't understand the words, but the idea is that you go and find out the lyric content, so when you go to the show you can enjoy it because you know what's going on. So anyway, that's how I've decided to go about saving rock and roll. I'm just going to find out about it, and I'm going to share as much information with you as I can. So, getting back to Mr. Rodriguez. Born and lives in Detroit, Michigan, also known as Sugar Man. Now, the artist who put out these albums back in the 60s has a very interesting story. I'm going to try to tell you what I know about it. He was doing protest songs, kind of urban rock songs that talked about his harsh upbringing in difficult times in Detroit. Back in the 50s, Mexican artists really didn't have much of a place in the rock and roll pantheon. I mean, things changed, of course. But at this time, it was very, very difficult to get your songs heard. Even if you put out a really decent album, you do a lot of work on it. And that's exactly what happened to Sixto. Put out one and parts of a second one with some very excellent songs. But the album tanked, as so many do. Promotion didn't work out. People didn't find out what they needed to know. They just didn't. Maybe they didn't like it, or maybe his time had not yet come. Well, unfortunately, his record company saw that his albums didn't do well in the United States. So what did they do? They put his music out in some other countries, and they never told him that his music was successful there. I'm talking about South Africa primarily. That's not a very nice thing to do to a guy, Just a good lesson for us all, really. Don't sign on the dotted line unless you get somebody to look at the fine print and tell you to go ahead and do that. Because, his albums are still in the courts as far as his trying to get his royalties. Now, his songs paralleled the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, really went right along with what was going on there at the time. So people were able to pick up on his sound and his meaning, and they were able to relate to it. Meanwhile, he had walked away from music. He got a job as a demolition man, worked on some assembly lines. This is Detroit, so there's work in the auto plants. But in the mid-70s, Australia, New Zealand, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and South Africa, these songs made a huge impact, and a lot of people bought these albums. But the record company did not tell him. Meanwhile, he was in Detroit. He bought himself a fixer-upper house and tried to turn it into some place where he could enjoy living by himself. He didn't have a phone. It wasn't time for cell phones yet. And if cell phones came out, they were like, big monstrous things. And, he didn't have that. And he didn't have a phone, so they couldn't call him and tell him whether or not his music was doing well in other countries. So I guess they tried to contact him, and perhaps they did not. Now, I don't know if that's even true. I would imagine that it is. This story is just too unbelievable. So anyway, he's off, not doing music, maybe a local coffee house once in a while. Just keep his pick moving, I guess. And lo and behold, one day, soon after the internet took off, his daughter saw a website about her father and his success in these other countries. And she was like, well, I'm going to have to tell him about this immediately. And when she explained it to him, he was flabbergasted. He couldn't believe it. But when it sunk in, he started getting angry. And of course he'd be angry about that. So he sued the record label, but the deliberations are still going on today in 2019. He still hasn't gotten his royalties for the 2 albums, but he did put out some more music. And this time, he made sure that the contract was going to favor him getting what he was due. And the albums are real good. He's still got it, folks. The song Sugarman was actually featured in the movie Candy. It's a Heath Ledger film. Heath Ledger's pretty cool, huh? I think. Sixto Rodriguez was featured on a 60-minute segment, and he also appeared on The Tonight Show and on Letterman and told his story about how the record companies had taken what was his and profited off him without telling him. And this really went viral. It became a national news story. But that album that he came out with after all this, let's talk about that a little bit. He has the song Sugar Man. Now that's about drug dealing. It's certainly not a pro-drug dealing song. It's just an observation about what he saw in his own neighborhood growing up. Second song, Only Good for Conversation. That was very psychedelic, folks. In third song, Crucify Your Mind, was pure protest, like Bob Dylan's early protest songs. Number 4, This Is Not a Song. No, that's the name of the song. This is not a song. The outburst of emotion is extraordinary. And 5, the Hate Street Dialogue. This is like urban surf rock. So, check him out. Find out about this stuff. You'll like him. Songs are really cool. They're timeless. Go on and on. Thanks a lot for being with me. And let's save rock one artist at a time. Thanks for being with me. See you next time.